How to measure up a room. Survey the area that you've got around you. If you're lucky enough, the kitchen has already been removed, so the measuring side of things should be relatively simple. If the kitchen's already installed, it is a little bit more tricky to do because they take into allowance splashbacks and other things like that. Usually one of the first things you do is you do a quick sketch of the actual room layout just on a piece of paper, and then from there you can start adding in your measurements. On a wall that is too long to do it all in one piece, often a good idea is to mark one end. So we've got 1500, and then you measure from the other side back, and I've got 1472. Double check where that mark is, 1500 and 1472. So just simply adding those two together, 2972. Often it's a good idea to use your calculator if you're not that good at maths, just to make sure. So on our first measurement along the wall, 2972. So once we've got our first measurement along here, I strongly recommend doing another measurement around about maybe 900 high or 500 high, and then also one down from the ceiling. What you want to do is to find out whether or not the walls are going like this or going like this, because if the top area is a little bit bigger than what your base cabinets are, you'll need to make your top cabinets slightly bigger, or to make sure that the filler is a little bit bigger. If the kitchen is already in situ, when you've done your measurement, you may have to then allow extra for your tiles that are on this side and your tiles that are on that side. So you might be allowing 6mm either side, depending on your thickness of your tiles or the thickness of your splashback. Another good thing to do with the plan is just mark on which one is wall A, B, C, D and E. And the reason for that is that when you're coming to mark out where all the power is going, you could mark this one as being wall B, and all I do here is I just simply put a little X marks the spot, and then just measure. So this one here is 640 and 1100 high, so 640mm, 1100 high. Just go through around the wall and just mark all your power locations, and this way then you can work out your cabinetry to either suit your power locations, or alternatively to at least let the electrician know where they need to be changed. Once you've actually done your measurements, a good little tip is I've worked this way and then that way for my measurements. One thing that I find that is very, very useful is if you actually just do a double check where you're working the other way. So for example here, I'm just going to mark that at 1500, so now I'm going in reverse, and 1472. So all I wanted to do was just to double check, because sometimes if you double check the same way, you make the same mistake. So this way, if you do another reverse check the other way, at the end after you've done all the measurements, go back and recheck them, but do the measurements the other way, you'll find that occasionally you'll pick up some very small mistakes that you may have made. Okay, if you're measuring a nib wall, so for example this wall is returning back, a good idea is to measure the distance that you've got down the bottom. So for example, 485, 486, 484, 483. Then what you do is you work off the smallest measurement that you've got. Don't work off the largest one. So it was 483 was my smallest measurement, so that's what I'm going to be working my wall to. So another measurement you'll need to take is the actual ceiling height. So I've got here 2445, and take it from some different areas as well. because ceilings, this one here is 24-25. It's very, very normal for ceilings to actually have different measurements. And 24-45. With your ceiling heights, you generally note your lowest level and also your highest level on your drawing. You need to also measure out where you've got any pipe work around there. Usually you'll need to know the centre line of where the actual waste actually comes through. And also too, what I recommend is doing this as a little square on your drawing. Something sort of similar to that. And just marking out where the outlines of your square go, just to ensure that your cabinetry is going to cover all of this. Because sometimes if you just take the measurement to the centre line of the waste, you've forgotten about where the pipe locations are. And you don't want to have your cupboard finishing there and then your pipes are not inside the actual cabinetry. So often I find it's a good idea just to do a little square around there and just pop in the measurements of the closest point here and the furthest point there, the closest point here and the furthest point there. Now this wall here has got its kitchen removed, and the people didn't put the gyprock behind there when they originally did it, so this is one thing that's going to need to be re-gyprock, which is fine. So what I'm going to do now is to take the actual measurements from the wall to the architrave. So I do have the gyprock that's down the bottom here, so I can measure that. 620, 611, and 611. You always measure to the inside of the architrave, to the outside of the wall. If you're doing the measurement of the door, you always measure from the outside of the architrave. So your measurement's always to the outside of the architrave when you're doing a door frame measurement. Along the walls, if there are any lights, so for example, there's a light that's around here, it's a good idea to measure how far the light is actually coming in, because you also want to note that on your drawing as well, because obviously if you've got, for example, cupboards going all the way here but you've forgotten about the light, then that's going to cause you a problem later on. What you can also do, especially more so with older homes, is you can check to see how level the walls are. This just gives you some idea of what's going on. These ones happen to be pretty good. The other thing too that we check is the actual level of the floor, because we basically want to see, is the floor going this way or that way, or is it quite level? And that's pretty good. Another thing that we can do too is to check the squareness of the walls. You can use Pythagoras' theorem, where you can measure out 3, 4, and the diagonal is 5, and that just works out whether or not the actual wall is square or not. Another quick, simple way, if you do have a shelf that, for example, is in your existing kitchen, you can actually use the shelf just to put the shelf into the wall. Basically what you're doing is you're just seeing whether or not the wall is going like that or going like this. Because sometimes too you may need to add extra onto your bench top. And you can do the same with the other corner. You can also do along the top. All you're really looking to see is whether or not the wall is kicking itself out further, in which case if you've got the cupboards coming along here, you may need to add extra onto your bench top on this side, because you may need to plane it to suit the wall. Both of these walls actually look really good. They look square, which can happen sometimes, and sometimes it can't. So it's one of those things, once you're aware of it, then you can actually make allowances not only in your design, but also in your actual final production layout, to make sure that you've allowed compensation for walls that are not true or square. That's why it's a good idea to take pictures, because sometimes, for example, like this house here, it's actually got spar path pipes that are on the other side of the wall. If you take photos of it when you're actually coming to not only the design stage, but also to the final production stage where you're actually doing the proper measurement takeoffs, that you're making sure that you're allowing for everything like this. So for example, here we'll need to make sure that the cabinetry not only covers this, but that the plumber, if he needs to, can actually get access to these pipes in the back. So your final layout should look something similar to this. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be scaled, it just has to have the correct measurements on it. So for example, make sure that you've got all the measurements of all the walls, any notations that you need to know, for example like a light switch, the location of your plumbing, that type of thing. Again, going back to your walls like A, B and C, a great idea is to just mark out each wall individually so you can also check the measurements. You will find that a design layout like this will be extremely beneficial, not only when you're doing the initial design but also when you're doing the final production drawings, because that way you've got notations of where everything is on the actual job. Always double check it so that you've got all the measurements in there. As you can see here, I don't have one measurement, so I need to go back and recheck this.